Two of the most powerful nations on Earth are locked in a rivalry that is reshaping global trade, technology, and military strategy. The United States and China are competing for dominance over semiconductors, supply chains, shipping lanes, and the future of artificial intelligence. Every country on the planet has been forced to pick a side, or at least appear to. Except one. There is a country sitting right at the center of this geopolitical storm that neither Washington nor Beijing can afford to lose. A country that has American tech giants pouring billions of dollars into its soil while simultaneously running the largest Chinese infrastructure project in Southeast Asia. A country that hosts U.S. military partnerships and Chinese trade relationships at the same time, without apology, and without blinking. That country is Malaysia. And the way it has engineered its position between two superpowers is one of the most remarkable strategic stories of the 21st century. So how did a country that most people in the West couldn't confidently place on a map become indispensable to both the United States and China at the exact same moment? And what happens if the two giants eventually force it to choose? Let's go back to where this story really begins. China has been Malaysia's largest trading partner for 15 consecutive years. That's not a recent development. That's a structural reality built over decades. By 2024, bilateral trade between Malaysia and China had already reached nearly $98 billion, matching in 11 months what had taken the entire previous year to achieve. The relationship didn't happen by accident. Malaysia was one of the earliest and most enthusiastic supporters of China's Belt and Road Initiative, the infrastructure megaproject that Beijing used to weave economic dependency across Asia, Africa, and beyond. If you're enjoying these stories about Malaysia, take a second to subscribe. Every subscription helps this channel create more videos and bring more fascinating stories, discoveries, and insights about Malaysia directly to you. The most visible example. The East Coast Rail Link, a 665-kilometer rail project connecting the east coast of peninsular Malaysia to Port Klang on the west coast, built as a joint venture with China Communications Construction Company, expected to be completed by December 2026. This is not a small project. At a cost of nearly 75 billion ringgit, it is one of the most significant infrastructure investments in Malaysian history, and China built it. So by any reasonable measure, Malaysia should be firmly in China's corner. Deeply connected. Economically intertwined. Almost dependent. And yet, Microsoft pledged $2.2 billion to Malaysia. Google committed $2 billion. NVIDIA partnered with Malaysian company YTL in a $2.36 billion deal focused on data centers and AI computing. These are not courtesy investments. These are strategic commitments from the most powerful American technology companies in the world, companies that operate in lockstep with U.S. government priorities on where critical technology infrastructure gets built. Intel announced an additional 860 million ringgit investment to anchor Malaysia as its global assembly and test hub. And in a detail that tells you everything you need to know about how deep these ties run, Intel's CEO at the time of those announcements was Malaysian-born, a reminder that Malaysia's human capital connections to Silicon Valley go far beyond investment deals. In a single year, Malaysia managed to secure billions from American tech while simultaneously deepening its railway, trade, and manufacturing links with China. That is not a coincidence. That is a strategy. Malaysia captured 32% of Southeast Asia's entire AI funding between the second half of 2024 and the first half of 2025, pulling in $759 million. In a region where Singapore had historically dominated and Vietnam was rising fast, Malaysia had suddenly become the place every serious technology investor wanted to be. Both the American ones and, quietly, the Chinese ones. But here is where the story gets complicated, because sitting at the center of a superpower rivalry is not a comfortable place to be. Malaysia occupies a precarious position at the intersection of the US-China trade war. Geopolitical competition increasingly manifests as regulatory pressure and supply chain coercion across the region. Washington's technology sanctions on China, particularly in the semiconductor industry, created a direct dilemma for Malaysia. Just days before leaving office, then US President Joe Biden unveiled the AI diffusion rule, placing Malaysia in Tier 2 of a global access framework that capped the country's ability to import advanced AI chips at 50,000 units over 2 years. For a nation actively positioning itself as a regional AI hub, that restriction stung. It sent a message: you are welcome in the supply chain, but you are not yet fully trusted at the cutting edge. Malaysia pushed back, diplomatically, strategically, and quietly. Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim met directly with NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang. Malaysia announced a landmark $250 million deal with British chip architect ARM Holdings to develop its own semiconductor capabilities and seed 10 local chip companies. The Malaysian government announced a national semiconductor strategy, investing 25 billion ringgit to transform the country's role in the global chip industry. The message from Kuala Lumpur was clear: Malaysia was not going to remain at the assembly end of someone else's supply chain forever. And on the China side, the balancing act is just as delicate. Beijing's continued militarization of the South China Sea presents an enduring challenge to Malaysia's maritime sovereignty. Malaysia is itself a claimant in the South China Sea dispute, meaning it is simultaneously a deep economic partner of China and a nation that has direct territorial tensions with it. Somehow, Malaysia has managed to hold both of those realities at the same time without the relationship collapsing. Malaysian leaders have repeatedly stated that their country must be fiercely independent and should not be forced to choose between the United States and China. Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim has described this as equidistant diplomacy, the idea that Malaysia extracts maximum benefit from both superpowers while preserving its freedom to act in its own interest. When asked about the US-China rivalry at the ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur, Anwar said simply, "I'm not saying all these issues can be resolved now, but at least there is real, meaningful, and positive engagement." That phrase, real, meaningful, positive engagement, is doing enormous work. It means Malaysia will talk to everyone. Sign deals with everyone. Build with everyone. And answer to no one. Malaysia has adopted what analysts describe as a pulling sideways policy, engaging both powers without aligning exclusively with either, seeking to set the terms of engagement in a region defined by great power rivalry. What makes Malaysia's position uniquely durable is geography. Sitting at the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula, with the Strait of Malacca running along its western coast, Malaysia sits on one of the most strategically important shipping choke points on Earth. Roughly a third of global maritime trade passes through the Strait of Malacca every single year. China needs that route open to receive energy from the Middle East. The United States needs it open to maintain naval presence and trade flows across the Indo-Pacific. Neither can afford instability in Malaysia. Neither can afford to push Malaysia so hard that it falls into the other's arms. This is not simply a lucky accident of geography. Malaysian policymakers have understood this leverage for decades and have built an entire economic and diplomatic architecture around it. Malaysia's ambition extends to the international monetary system itself. Prime Minister Anwar has called for de-dollarization and proposed an Asian Monetary Fund, initiatives designed to give small and middle powers greater flexibility and autonomy, to mitigate fallout from geopolitical rivalry and shield Malaysia from uncertainties should the US-China competition intensify. These are not the moves of a country that sees itself as a passive player in someone else's game. These are the moves of a country that intends to shape the rules. Don't forget to take a second to subscribe. Every subscription helps this channel create more videos and bring more fascinating stories, discoveries, and insights about Malaysia directly to you. The question everyone eventually asks is, what happens when the pressure finally becomes unbearable? What happens when Washington and Beijing stop tolerating Malaysia's refusal to choose and demand a definitive answer? The honest answer is that both superpowers have already calculated the cost of losing Malaysia, and neither is willing to pay it. The United States cannot afford to lose a semiconductor hub, a critical supply chain node, and a maritime partner in Southeast Asia. China cannot afford to lose its largest ASEAN trading partner, its Belt and Road Showcase, and its gateway to the Indian Ocean. Malaysia knows this. And it is using that knowledge every single day. In a world increasingly defined by which side you are on, Malaysia has decided that the most powerful position of all is the one that makes both sides need you. Not a follower of the United States. Not a client of China. Something rarer and harder to build, a country that both giants cannot afford to lose. That is not a weakness. That is perhaps the most sophisticated form of national strategy being practiced anywhere on Earth right now.